My name is Jonathan Mosney. I'm a front-end web developer, and I've been doing it for about 6 years. My dad worked at home. He was a freelance architect, and before that he was kind of a concept designer. He actually worked at Disney. He worked at Disneyland designing Disney World, and so he was like an early day Imagineer, which is pretty awesome. He's got tons of old drawings of that stuff, and he loves to talk about it. Those are like his favorite days of his career. My mom is an X-ray technician, or diagnostic imaging, I guess, is kind of an umbrella field. So just doing different images of people's bodies to help doctors do their work. I was lucky, I think. They didn't have hardly any expectations that they voiced to me. I was the third child, and my brother and sister are like 10 and 11 years older than me. My parents they didn't put a lot of pressure on me on what to do. They let me choose my own path and kind of, work my way through it. They had suggestions along the way, but like I think my dad at one point was like, you should, like, why don't you get into, acting or art or something? Like he was like trying to make sure I didn't do anything too boring. I liked high school. I really liked it. It was just a big social party for me. I don't think I tried really hard, but I sure had a good time. I had a bunch of good teachers, a bunch of inspirational teachers, a bunch of good friends, people I still stay in touch with, 20 years later. I had great art teachers, and I think most of my fun was in art class. At one point, this is kind of extracurricular, but I was doing clothing design for a couple years. And eventually, it kind of culminated in a fashion show that I did in the park next to my high school, and I got a bunch of my high school friends to kind of be the models. It was great, just like pick up kind of entrepreneurial style, like, hey, let's just do this. I was the most irresponsible student, especially at first. I think later on, when the marks seemed to matter. In Ontario, I grew up in Ontario, Canada, and there they paid attention to your sort of 6 top classes or 6 particular classes, depending on your major, in your final year, and those grades were the most important. And it wasn't until that pressure came up, I was like, oh, this matters now. Like, these are gonna be some decisions that affect my life later on. That's when I started working at it. Before that, I was just playing around. I did sports a little bit. I was into rollerblading pretty hard. So yeah, I had my little gang of friends that we went around and rollerbladed. Did a lot of just biking around. I was, like I said, I was really into clothing design, and I remember I designed some mittens, and they were made of faux fur and vinyl, and I sold them to this clothing store in the next city over. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I was always just trying to make money and come up with some weird business. The internet did not exist yet when I was in high school. It was starting to emerge. I was into computers. I didn't own one because I guess I couldn't afford one. I think I was always begging for one, but I never got a computer. So no, I didn't know I was gonna be a web designer, web developer. There were bulletin boards. That's kind of the level that the internet was at. I graduated in 1996, so that gives you an idea. There was no Google, that's for sure. Should have thought of that. I spent a long time in college. I spent so long there that I wanted to teach college by the end of it. I started out at Academy of Art University in San Francisco, although it was a college at that point. They hadn't been accredited yet. So yeah, I started out in industrial design, did that for about 1.5 to 2 years, then decided that wasn't right for me. So I started doing just kind of general ed stuff at a community college. It was super cheap, kind of got me exposed to a bunch of different ideas. And yeah, I just did the whole gamut, philosophy, literature, science, anthropology, math. Is just I was just soaking it all up, So that was fun. And eventually you have to pick a major. So I decided to do cultural anthropology. I transferred to University of California, Santa Cruz, graduated 2 years later with cultural anthropology BA, and that was kind of the extent of my college career. I originally thought I wanted to be a teacher, and I wasn't sure sort of college or high school, but I thought, okay, if I want, either way that I want to do that, I need some kind of starting like bachelor's program. I really liked cultural anthropology. It was, they were some of my favorite classes, and yeah, it's kind of involves sort of like studying the way people living cultures behave and how they're different. And I'd done a lot of traveling already, sort of during high school and even prior to that in grade school. So I've been exposed to a lot of different cultures early on. So I was really interested in just the differences between cultures and how much from a culture people, are how much of their personality is composed from sort of the greater culture. So I was really into intercultural anthropology. I thought, okay, I'll just keep studying that. But whatever it is, I'll be able to become a teacher after when I go to this master's program in education. So it was kind of like a low pressure choice. It's not like I wanted to like be Indiana Jones and be like an anthropologist like that. I just thought, this will be a good path through college. Mostly loans. My mom paid for a bunch of the art school, and there were a bunch of loans involved. And then, yeah, more student aid, government student aid through university. And yeah, my parents didn't save any money, like whether they could or not, I don't know, probably not. They didn't save any money for me to go to college, so it was all loans. It's a pretty nascent field, so there aren't a lot of certifications or formal labels or programs. There's computer science, which is kind of opens you up to do a lot of sort of hardcore programming. I'm not exactly sure what I would call it, but it's kind of related. There's some overlap with web developer profession. Definitely computer science would give you an excellent background to be a programmer and learn new programming languages. But it doesn't give you the whole package. So I think there are some programs now coming out of different colleges, like I know the University of California, I know the Cal Poly has a really nice kind of hybrid program, a little bit of programming, a little bit of design that's specifically geared for web developers. There are tons and tons of resources on the internet to teach yourself. Like my theory is like half of the content on the internet is how to make the internet. So I spent like just countless hours there doing tutorials. I think a college degree would probably still be a prerequisite almost anywhere. I mean, it is such a young field that I think a lot of places probably would welcome you if you had a portfolio that showed that you can do what you need to do. But I still think people would be a little skeptical, and there are so many skills that you learn in college that are just how to work with people, how to stay organized, how to promise and meet a deadline. I think that those skills are some of the best sort of general skills that you learn in college, and I think employers understand that too. It was a long, windy, scary, confusing path that was not well defined from the start. I came out of high school and had no idea what I wanted to do. I was just worked for a couple years, and then I started going to college. Actually, I went to design school in San Francisco. I went to Academy of Art college then. Now it's a university. That lasted for about a year and a half, and I was doing industrial design, which is like product design, sort of like all the everyday things that we use, cars and consumer products and stuff like that. Something happened, it wasn't right for me, so I left that, kind of went into community college and just took the whole gamut, just every kind of class, because I didn't know what I was going to do. I changed majors every quarter, and eventually, I think after spending so long in school, I thought the best thing to do would be become a teacher. I completed college for cultural anthropology, actually, And but this whole time I was like sort of self-teaching myself to make websites. I just came to realize like that's what I actually love doing is making these websites. And so my whole teaching career kind of like fizzled out, and I started working for an agency here in Santa Cruz, and then that kind of parlayed to bigger and better things. My first freelance gig, I was actually working for a sign company in Campbell, California. They were, being in Silicon Valley, they were kind of head start on things, they were kind of forward thinking, and they wanted a website. And I think I actually suggested it, but they kind of knew they needed to start thinking about that. So yeah, I made their site. And I worked for them, so you might think that I would just volunteer and do it for free. But no, I also charged them. So I wanted to make a little end on the side. But yeah, it was a good learning experience. I did more and more freelance work, sort of like all through college. I was doing these freelance projects just through word of mouth. I would be like the reliable guy that would actually finish your project. My first actual gig in web, I was a project manager. So when you're a freelancer, you actually are also a project manager, just on a kind of a small scale. You're managing the client's sort of expectations, the project deadlines and timeline, and you're managing your own time. So you're kind of jack of all trades, and that worked for me. And I think the owner of that company kind of understood that there were some skills that were portable there, and definitely on a much larger scale. But that's how I got that gig, was basically my portfolio and previous experience in freelance. When I was doing freelance, all of my projects seemed kind of small time, and they were just for like Joe Plumber guy. When it came time to apply to a real company that was making real sites, it was very unnerving and sort of daunting to be approaching this really famous company that built excellent, high quality stuff. I just didn't think I was good enough. I really thought I wasn't ready. And I had a friend there, so I did have that really nice in, and he was a super advocate for me. But I said to him, like, man, I'm not ready. Like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not good enough. And he just told me, he's like, dude, you're ready. You are ready. Like, you got to do it. And that really, he gave me the confidence. Just he made me feel ready. And it turned out that I was. Like, when I got there, I knew what I was doing. But it's scary to be on the outside anywhere. A web page starts out as usually just a sketch on a piece of paper. And so take a marker, sketch a bunch of boxes on a piece of paper. Headline here, image here, sidebar, stuff like that. And then it kind of goes to a designer where they would use Photoshop to build it into another sort of static image of a site, but with a lot more resolution. So there's an actual image and an actual headline. Then it comes to me. It's not a website yet, right? It's just a Photoshop document, or an image, a flat image that can't be used. Then it comes to me, and so I kind of have to take it back apart again. I look at the shape and structure of the page. Maybe there's like a wide column and a skinny column, and there's some like main headline, there's some main image. So I kind of take it apart from maybe a structural or a semantic sort of level, sort of like what is the meaning of each of these sections. And I have a strong knowledge of HTML, and that is sort of when you pull up a web page, you're pulling up an HTML document. It's just a file. So I program that file, like I type it into a keyboard, and just looking at the document, the image that I've been given, I sort of retranslate that into the code that I write. And there's actually three types of code. There's HTML, which is probably, I would describe as kind of the skeleton of a body. That's like the structural, general shape of a web page. Then there's CSS, that's cascading style sheets, and that's kind of the skin or the more physical attributes of, if we have this person analogy. And then there's JavaScript, which is kind of the interactive side. So like maybe the verbs of what the person is doing, or just the ways that you would interact with a person. So using those three languages, I create working web pages. And yeah, there's so much to consider along the way. There's like making sure search engines can see it and making sure it's accessible. Making sure that it looks good on a mobile device or across a wide variety of devices. The general idea is kind of taking a designer's vision and turning it into a working web page for the rest of the world. I spend obviously quite a bit of time actually programming websites. So that's sitting at a desk, looking at a design and turning it into a web page. And that involves, mostly writing code. So I have my computer, I have my text editor, and type. So that's a pretty significant chunk of what I do. Although, I've read, maybe I don't notice this, but I've read that you actually spend a lot of time thinking about what to code and less time actually coding it. So maybe I'm just mostly sitting there thinking. Another significant portion is actually learning about what I'm doing. So I'm constantly studying the languages that I write because they're evolving. New standards are emerging, new features are coming out. I work with browsers, so there are probably 4 major browsers that I'm used to writing a web page for. And they all have their nuances and differences, so I'm always kind of learning about the new things that they support and what the new code that's going to be supported will be. There's a lot of sort of helper code that you can take that's sort of free open source stuff, but you have to learn how to use it. So I spend a lot of time learning, and that's mostly researching on the internet, sitting at my desk, reading. And then the rest of the time, this is maybe it's like 30% each, sort of 1/3 each. The rest of the time is meeting with people like designers and other stakeholders to talk about the project itself. Maybe they're the marketing stakeholder and they want to tell me about the web page that they want to build. And that usually involves kind of a larger group of people, like maybe half a dozen people, kind of learning about the project and kicking off or checking in. It takes a lot of different people to make a website, especially at kind of the larger companies that I've been working at. So the roles are pretty well defined, I guess. There's sort of a combination of marketing directors, people that kind of have the overall vision and set of goals for what the website's trying to do, what it's trying to communicate. That's kind of where the idea is born or where the need is born. And then from there, it would sort of go to maybe a set of planners, like a writer, a designer, an information architect. And an information architect is kind of a new term. So that's somebody who plans kind of the structure of a web page or a website. So what are all the pages we're going to need, and how are they connected together? And then on sort of a page level, it's like, well, how is the page going to be structured informationally? And I work with a lot of other programmers, and I spend a lot of time just kind of talking to other programmers, sort of trading knowledge and talking about the newest sort of techniques for doing things in our languages. I work with sort of organizational people like project managers, or sometimes they're called producers. I work with like quite a variety of different people throughout the day, and everybody's got their own, needs, concerns. So every single person kind of has a different angle on the project. So it's kind of good to be able to be empathetic to their needs and also get your sort of advocate for your needs as well as the user's needs. That's kind of a big part of what I do. It's very much the office job. You have your chair and your desk space. I work on a computer almost 80% of the day. So I'm either sitting at my desk at a computer, or I'm in some kind of meeting situation, which might be standing up around some boards that have the designs on them, or sitting in another office in a conference room talking to people. Most companies are very sensitive to people's ergonomic situations, like making sure they're comfortable in their desks, because you spend a lot of time at a desk. Problems can arise with your posture, and there's carpal tunnel syndrome can happen. it's never been a problem for me, but I guess I'm still kind of young. So yeah, places that I've worked, they like make sure to set up an ergo appointment for you, make sure your desk is at the right level, and explain to you how to, set your posture correctly. I've always been really into making things, and I like to make things with my hands quite often, but I also have come to really appreciate making things for the internet. They're very ethereal, and they're sort of one day a web page is there, one day it's gone, but I still really get the satisfaction of making something there. And you also get to work with a lot of different people. It's kind of a nice mix. You get to work by yourself, so I like spending some time working by myself, but then I also get to partner with other people, a lot of different people too. So I kind of like that mix. Working here in Silicon Valley, there's very much a startup culture, and even the large companies, they can act like startups too, and in the sense that sort of the 8-hour workday doesn't always exist. And it probably makes sense for that probably holds true for a lot of different companies, but I've definitely experienced it a lot in the web creating world. So I think almost any company you work for would expect you to work weekends if necessary, late nights. I mean, I've stayed up till 2, 3 in the morning, like for a week straight, working on projects. But hopefully there's a great reason for that. So hopefully you're building something awesome, and you have good people to be around at that, through it. There's definitely a big component of constant learning if you're a web developer. It's such a rapidly moving field. You have to constantly be learning. So I often spend probably half my day just researching new technologies. So you have to be somebody who's willing to do that. I like that. I like constant learning, and I think a lot of fields still require that, but it probably is more than ever in web tech. The constant learning that you have to do, the field is moving so quickly that sometimes it's hard to keep up. So you always have to be kind of chasing what technology is coming next, and you really actually have to make some bets on the technology that you're going to go for, because there's just such a variety of directions you can take it. The challenge is really sort of continually studying, picking a technology and kind of running with it, and becoming an expert in some specific set of technologies that help you make a complete website. We work on individual projects, so there's kind of a brief, and this is a marketing brief. We have this product that we want to message, or customers don't understand this feature. So there's sort of within the brief there's a problem to solve, there's a goal, and it's make a big announcement about this product, or help communicate our supplier responsibility or environmental report in a positive light. So I work in marketing, so it's all about spin and the message, and making the company look great or the product look great. So that's kind of the goal or the problem, the challenge, and then the result is the finished product website. And so I guess you would measure the success in terms of how well does it work, how well can you use it. We often do get very much into metrics, like how many people visited the site. When there's a lot of buzz, and I've been working for some pretty popular companies, so we get some pretty big numbers. We get a lot of visitors. That's always really good. We also go into some different kinds of metrics, like how fast does the web page load, how many files have to load, and how quickly. So the faster you can get it to a person, the longer they're going to stay, and the better experience they're going to have. So we go from sort of intangible goals, like was it a media success, was it portrayed positively, and sort of other intangibles, like was it a good user experience. People will do usability testing. They'll kind of watch people use your website and see if they get to the goal at the end, like click the buy button or whatever it is, to very measurable, tangible goals like metrics, how many visitors, how small was the web page, how fast did it load, kind of the whole gamut. And you definitely need to be sort of a constant learner. You just have to enjoy, doing research and kind of continually recharging your skills. As a front-end web developer, you're kind of where the rubber meets the road as far as the user is concerned. So you really need to have sort of I like to call it empathy for the user. You need kind of like, what's the best experience for them? Not what's going to be the easiest thing for me to do, or other concerns. Really, the number one concern is always the user. So it's good to have kind of like maybe an empathetic personality or some aspect where you can, trade your time for some anonymous person's great experience down the line. Finally, probably just being able to work with like a variety of people, because like I said, everybody's kind of got their own needs when it comes to building a website, but you're doing it as a team, so caring about each other's requirements. My freelance jobs started out really small and kind of petty, and just, can you make a site for like this book that I wrote at home or something, some really basic stuff. I was the guy that would always, complete the project, and through word of mouth, you kind of get to be known as the reliable person, and that actually goes a really long way. So, being able to give your word and give a date and complete a project, it's surprising how much value that has for people. Obviously, the product needs to be high quality too, but if it's really high quality and you don't make the date, it doesn't matter. It's not there. So yeah, being able to, kind of follow through on your promise and complete things, super important. Something that's helped me has been to be sort of a generalist, where like I feel like my strength is that I'm sort of design oriented, user experience oriented, and also programming. But not everybody has to be that way. Some people are, very lean toward the programmer side of things, and I work with people that have computer science degrees. That's sort of common, but on the other hand, it's such a nascent field that a lot of people are kind of self-taught, or a lot of people come from some other weird tangentially connected background. But I think if you really want to take it really far and have maybe more options in web development, then I think probably the smartest thing would be to get a computer science degree. On the other hand, I would be careful doing that, just because you can go like too far down the programmer edge of things. Web developers really do kind of have to keep in mind so many moving parts: the design aspect, the usability aspect, and the programming, that it's good to make sure you have kind of a nice combination of skills. Don't become such an egghead programmer only that you kind of forget about why you're doing it, and you're doing it for people. The field is always changing. Web is such it's such a brand new field, and it's right on the cutting edge of technology. I think it's hard to predict what's going to happen with the internet. I know for sure that there'll always be new versions of the languages that I write. Some really interesting things that are happening are, a lot of the technology, a lot of the consumption of the internet is shifting to mobile, and so kind of you have a different set of concerns there. You're trying to communicate a message in a much smaller physical device space, so there's that kind of challenge. But then you also have the awesome ability to kind of know more about the user's situation. So you could know like geographically where they are. You could know kind of like what time of day it is, or maybe more preferences about that person, if they provided that information. So you have the ability to give people sort of quick and contextually, relevant information. Something that's really interested me recently that I was really impressed and excited about, I just started at a new company, and I discovered when I got there that every week at a given time, the founders of the company address the whole company and answer questions and talk about what's happening in a very transparent way for an hour and a half. And there's something so awesome about being connected that closely, and having the ability to like raise a hand and speak directly to the founders. and sort of be that involved in the company. The perks are pretty awesome at a lot of internet technology companies. There's a super high demand for web developers, and I think that one of the ways that kind of plays out is that I become this, like, I don't want to say superhero, but I become a really important person in the organization. My skills are kind of in high demand, so the perks are really good. I've been working for like sort of a couple of the larger technology companies, and they have some of the best benefits of any jobs anywhere probably. But one thing that I see that's pretty common for smaller startups as well as larger companies is like meals are provided, and that somehow goes a really long way. Like, I don't know, there's just something about your company buying you a meal that just feels really good. The pay is definitely, I think, really good, and especially for me, considering that I didn't actually go to school formally in college for what I do. I think I'm kind of lucky in that way to get paid so well and not have the formal college training. Laboring for hours over something that starts out as just thin air, and creating something that people can use, interact with, have an experience with, share with other people. It's sort of, you've created this thing out of thin air, and working with a lot of other talented people to create it, I think is a huge win too.